Welcome to Get Online with Stacey Keogh. Today, I am joined by Rupal Patel, who helps women founders start, scale, and supercharge their businesses through events, workshops, and a community where founders come together to support each other practically and intangibly. It's called Entreprenora, and it's a different type of community because Rupal works to nurture the whole founder, not just their business, and helps members crystallize their vision, find and communicate their voice, amplify their visibility, and own their value, all while helping them declutter their lives and businesses so that they can live in their flow. Rupal has been named one of 12 women who can wow us all, and that is so true. She's been appointed Entrepreneur in Residence at the London Business School and has been featured in Harper's Bazaar in an article that discusses her career in the CIA all the way through to becoming a CEO. It's titled, What I've Learned from Working in Espionage. Intrigued? Let's jump into this episode because we had the most amazing conversation. See you there. Hello and welcome to the show today, Rupal.
Thank you, Stacey. It's great to be here. I'm so excited to speak to you today.
I have heard that you just did your first live event back after lockdown in person. How was that yesterday?
Yeah, it felt so good, Stacey. I am definitely an in-person sort of feel the energy in the room, feel the energy of another person. And it was a small but mighty group, because we still have to have social distancing in place. But it felt really good to see faces, to be able to interact before and after, we were hugging some of us. I know it's a bit controversial these days.
So good.
It was excellent.
It's tricky, isn't it? So, well, maybe I'll explain quickly now how we met each other. So you and I obviously were speaking at an event. Obviously we didn't know each other.
Nope.
There were two speaking slots, essentially. I was your warm-up act, wasn't I? Headline speaker was you. And we'd never met each other. I obviously spoke, I think it was like a tiny networking break, and then you went on and spoke. And then after the event, you and I both just sort of gravitated towards each other. We're both just like, oh, I love you. I think I love you a little bit.
Yeah, pretty much.
It was so good because you have such awesome energy as a speaker. And I just remember seeing you, and just everything you walked through was the thing that sort of shone through for me was the values. Like, you just talked about how important values are in your business, and you have this just amazing energy. And I just felt completely drawn to you. So it was really exciting. I was so pleased that we got to meet each other off the back of that.
Same here. Well, as you said, it was a bit of a meeting of a mutual admiration society, because I remember thinking, like, gosh, and it's not just because you're a Kiwi, but there was something, again, it's that thing of, the energy exchange when you're in the same physical space as another person. And I was like, I want her to be my friend. And here we are.
Exactly. Yeah. And you and I have stayed in touch ever since. And really fortunately being able to introduce lots of mutual friends to each other. And just kind of kept in touch. It's been so good. So I'm so pleased. Cool. Before we get into today's episode, why don't we go back and tell our listeners a little bit about you? So start from the beginning, because you've got the most interesting career path and you've done a lot of different things. So I would love for you to share with us sort of where you started and then how you got to where you are now, and then maybe explain a little bit about your current business.
Gosh, so I guess career-wise, my first sort of quote-unquote proper job was working in intelligence, and so foreign intelligence. And I was sort of a serial nerd. So, my go-to move whenever I'm uncertain about what to do next is to get a degree or go back to school. And I had gotten a degree in international affairs, and I thought, what can I do with this degree? I love living abroad. I love understanding new cultures. I love meeting new people, all that kind of thing. This position came up at one of the intelligence agencies in the States. And I thought, okay, cool. I hadn't really planned for it, but why not? It seems like a great opportunity. So I did that for about sort of half of my professional career to date. And it was a fantastic experience, Stacey. And it was one of those things where, with the benefit of hindsight, you can sort of make more sense of a lot of it and really be able to pick out the things that were so pivotal and so life expanding from that part of my career. And I think one of the things that I realized from that was just how much I love people, and how throwing yourself into new environments, different environments that you previously were sort of like, oh, not really sure, should I or shouldn't I kind of thing, can be one of the best things you can do for yourself. And I just met some of the most interesting, smart, creative, funny, quirky, weird people.
Really? Yeah. So are you allowed to, it was with the CIA, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Are you allowed to say that? I feel like it's
I am, yeah. I can't say much more, but yeah, I can definitely say that.
It's kind of, I mean, I just feel like that's so impressive, because it feels like just I should be watching some kind of crazy foreign intelligence TV show of some sort. Like it's just such like a foreign concept, isn't it? Or for obviously not for you because you've done it, but for me to be able to think about that, it's just amazing. And so cool that you kind of mentioned that in terms of the type of people too, because I don't know why, as you said that, my interpretation is that, I hope this isn't offensive, I mean this in a very positive way, I feel like your personality almost like doesn't really align with that type of career. I don't know why, because you're so like people orientated and just progressive and really exciting. And I don't know why I've put a bit of a label on that sort of industry, thinking that it's not that creative for some reason.
It's well, yeah, maybe creativity isn't one of the standouts, but what I think is people who are really thoughtful, people who want to understand the world and understand how things work and how they operate. For me and a lot of my colleagues, a lot of what drew us to the agency was the sense of mission and common purpose.
Yeah.
And being part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think that attracts a huge and very interesting array of people. Again, quirks and nerdiness and, you know, sort of James Bond types and all sorts.
Yeah.
And you're just sort of thrown into this environment and you're like, God, if I didn't work here, there's no way in my normal existence would I have ever come across
some of these people.
Ever.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, actually. Now that you say that, it does make sense in terms of just having that curiosity into understanding people and you know, I'm sort of all sorts of things, but again, we can't go too much into it, but very, very exciting.
No.
Okay, so then what happened? So after that, after your period
after that, you know, it was just, and it's funny because I spoke about this yesterday. If I had to put a reason behind why I left, it was really because it was this thing that I think it's Oprah who calls it this inner knowing. And it started to sort of gnaw at me, this sense of like wanting to do something bigger with more impact there was nothing wrong. You know, I was like doing all the right things. I was on track for, you know, promotion and advancement and blah, blah, blah. But for me, it just there were a couple of things that happened in my personal life that I was like, well, maybe now is a good time to try something new, because, you know, the way it works in most sort of public sector roles is that if you want, you could have a job for life. And while that is appealing in some ways in the security, for me, I didn't want to ever come to the end of my life wondering, could I have tried something else and succeeded at something else and done, you know, it was almost to the point where I had ticked all the personal and professional boxes I wanted to tick by that point. And I thought, okay, well, it's time for the next adventure and to sort of go on that journey of self-discovery again. And so, as I said, my go-to move is to get degrees. And so I moved to London and I got an MBA at London Business School. I thought it would be a perfect credential to put on my CV to then transition into a corporate career, and who knew where it would lead kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what I realized, and again, going back to that idea of like an inner knowing, was I didn't want to work for anybody else ever again. And going through that process over the 2 years that I was doing the degree, it was a constant battle of like saying no to what was expected, saying no to, you know, interviewing for the most sought after positions that everybody else was, you know, angling for, because that just wasn't for me. And I knew it wasn't for me. And it was so easy to get wrapped up into it. And so what ended up happening, and what I decided alongside my partner at the time, who's now my husband, was that actually, you know, I'd always wanted to be my own boss. This was something that was ingrained in me and instilled in us by my parents from a very young age. And I thought, well, why not give it a go, you know, and see what happens. And so what I started, as you do, a real estate development and investment company in 2012, and we've still got that business operating now. And the good thing about it is that it really helped me explore, one, the fundamentals of what it means to have a business, right? And be a business owner and grow something from scratch, because business school is all theory and case studies. And when you're doing it yourself, it's totally different.
Yeah.
And then secondly, I knew getting started that, look, I love what I do, but it's not my forever industry. But I viewed our property business in some ways as a means to an end, or the end being that it would help me buy back my time, buy back my freedom, cover my living expenses, so then I could, and hopefully more, when we were getting started, to then be able to really explore with some freedom what is going to happen next. So it was always that idea of like, okay, work on this, focus on this, but this is just a stop on a longer journey. And what that end destination was, I was just open to. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, but what I did know was that I wanted to, my sort of personal legacy I wanted to leave behind was to have an impact in some really positive and powerful way on millions of people. So, you can potentially do that with property. I don't know. But it wasn't, for me, I knew property wasn't going to be it. It was just, like I said, something that would help enable me to find what that next thing was.
Yeah, got it. I mean, it's really interesting because I think a lot of times people feel that when they go to start a business that, I guess a lot of times businesses are started off the back of passion or off the back of, doing something that you super, super love. Where for you, actually, it sounds to me from what you've said is that you were looking at, right, this is actually really sensible business. And this is a way for, I know a lot of people in property would probably disagree that it is passive, but it's a way to some degree, create a fairly, passive income to then be able to focus on those things that you absolutely adore and things that give you purpose and things that you love. So it's smart, it really is.
And I think, well, it comes up a lot in the work that I do now with founders across industries. And it's this idea of like, if you're not pursuing your passion from the second you start your career, then you're somehow failing or you're somehow behind. And for a lot of people, actually, one, it takes a while to understand and uncover what that passion is. But two, I mean, I think it's really, really important that we don't forget about the practical. There's no sense starting a passion business if you're not going to be able to feed yourself or pay the bills, And so I think there's no shame in doing the practical stuff, doing the stuff that has to get done, so then you can pursue and find that passion with, like I said earlier, with a bit more freedom. And it takes so much of the pressure off. And it just, I think it's a really important thing that a lot of people forget, is this idea of like, okay, what is my financial runway? What is my war chest, or whatever you want to call it? But it's really, really important to have a plan for that. So then you can pursue the other stuff with just a bit more abandon.
I think it's great. I think a lot of, people could say this about the way that we're educated or whatever, that a lot of people do not have a very good understanding of finance actually, and how to manage our money and how to, really understand how do we take care of that before we choose to invest in other things or choose to do other things in our careers or and creating the lifestyle that we want. We don't actually know how to look at that, which is kind of, it's crazy, isn't it, really? So amazing that you had the ability, obviously, once you've worked for, intelligence organizations, and then you've done your MBA in business school, that's clearly obviously given you a really, really great foundation for being able to run a very successful business. So, and then obviously what's happened off the back of that, since you've achieved that, and then you have gone and started Entreprenora. So tell us a little bit about that and what it is that you do now.
Yeah. Do you know, Stacey, it's funny because the second you said the word Entreprenora, my face I started beaming. And that is what I discovered is my calling, my passion, my sort of the legacy I want to lead. And if I had to put it really succinctly, so Entrepreneur is a community for women leaders and founders. And this isn't the official tagline, but my personal tagline is to really help women find and release their inner badass. Because
I love that. Yeah.
I think there's so much that we hold ourselves back from, that we don't put ourselves forward for. There's all of these things around worth and mindset and visibility and voice. And, we work on all of these things. But for me, sort of that inner badass is in a lot of the women in our community. They just need a community of support around them to help them find it and uncover it, and then also just refine it. So like business is the vehicle through which we do it, but the end goal is twofold. Is one, going back to what you said about the financials, is to help women become financially abundant in whatever abundance means for them. It could be having FU money. It could be just being able to quit their job. It could be whatever number is their abundance number. But for me, the financial abundance is so important because it just gives us options. It gives us freedom. It gives us options, and it gives us more of a say either in our home lives and or in our social lives, as far as like, if you care about political issues, or if you want to support a cause, or if you want to help other people. Money isn't the answer to everything, but it sure as hell does answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, it definitely helps along the way, doesn't it? I mean, do you find actually like working with some of these women, is talking about money and finance challenging? Like, is there, I don't know why, it just kind of sparked whether there was some kind of like shame around being successful and,
Do you know what's interesting? There's so many different money hangups that come up.
Yeah.
And a lot of what we do in the community and in our mastermind group and boardroom is around money mindset and our views on money and our attitudes around money. And I think everybody's different, surprisingly, or not surprisingly. And you've got people, we've got some women in our community who are running businesses that are making 6, 7, 8 figures. And yet they still don't think they're quote unquote good with money, or they still get anxious about pitching themselves to clients to bring in more money, or they're perhaps a little bit uncertain about how to invest the money that they are making. It comes in all forms and all stripes. And I think what's really interesting is that your income and your quote unquote success level has no bearing on the money hurdles and on your internal money mindset at all. And there's so many shared things, again, around worth, around pricing, around who controls the money and how much they have and what's done with it and all of this kind of stuff, that it's pretty agnostic about, who it affects and how. A lot of it comes from what you saw growing up, some of the messages you internalized in your career, and then, things that happen over a course of a lifetime. But a lot of the themes are around this idea just that gets to worthiness. And not that we ever tried to put a monetary value on ourselves or our worth, but it really does come down to like, do I think I deserve it? Do I think I'm worth it or worthy? And why me? Those kinds of questions come up quite a lot.
Yeah, I think it's a really difficult subject, actually. We're going off on a bit of a little side road here, but it just made me realize that I've definitely had comments from usually male clients who sort of probe at whether it's appropriate for me to be charging what I charge, or that, and almost like I sometimes have had to validate why and I've kind of thought, what, like, why are you making me feel uncomfortable about this? Because I'm not sure that you would actually ask a man the same questions. As in, it's sort of offensive that you're even challenging it. It really kind of gets my back up. And just as you were speaking there, it kind of took me back to, in an earlier episode, actually, on the podcast, we spoke to Paul Dunn from B1G1, who I traveled with last year to Kenya. I think I've spoken to you about this trip that I did as well, which was amazing. And we met, so we give a lot of business loans and business training to women that are starting business in East Africa. And so we were fortunate enough to meet some of them while we were there. So there were 24 of these business women, and there were 24 of us that had traveled to Kenya to meet with them. And we had this sort of really cool experience where we shared a little bit about our businesses and some of the challenges that we have. And then they told us about their businesses and told us their challenges. And then we just helped each other brainstorm. So we kind of did this like little mastermind session. And obviously we run really different businesses, I run a digital marketing agency. And then I'm sitting down with a woman who buys, fish from the fishermen down at the dock, dries them, and then sells them in a market. Our businesses are very, very different, but a lot of our challenges were the same.
Yeah.
But one of the really funny things that actually came up was around money. And a lot of these women are actually really successful. They're buying their own land, they're collaborating to purchase, not really an office, but sort of like a piece of land where they could have a building structure where they could all meet and manage their businesses and all that kind of thing, which was quite incredible. And one of the questions that we actually posed was, are you more successful, for example, than some of your husbands? And every single one of them was.
Yeah.
However, they all started laughing, like hysterically laughing, and said, but we don't tell them. And we were like, oh, they're like, we hide the money. And I was like, and it was funny at the time. Like it was like, we were all hysterically laughing, and it was just, we're kind of like, oh, we do that too. It doesn't matter where in the world you are, that seems to be something hangs over. But then when you give that more thought, you're like, that sucks. Like, why should you have to do that? And there's almost that sort of like, social element, I suppose, as to whether that's an appropriate thing and it's just not accepted. And I guess a little bit comes down to whether that's feeling ourselves, whether we're worthy enough, or whether that's put on us to feel like we're not worthy enough. I'm not really sure. But it's quite interesting.
Well, and it's so complex and, like you said, interwoven in social relationships, not wanting to make other people feel bad about, all of these other things. And, I've done a lot of work on my money mindset. And I think one of the things that I realized is that I did the same thing. Like I would make certain financial decisions and then just not tell my husband because I was afraid of, or not even afraid. It's not like what was going to happen.
Yeah.
It was more just like I just didn't share them because I thought like, oh, well, I don't want to have that conversation. And then, it was sort of after having done some of that internal work on myself around money mindset and worth and, financial decisions and all of that kind of thing, I was like, this is stupid. My personal position has now gotten really adamant. It's like, no, it's because I also firmly believe, and this is a bigger sort of position on everything, about owning your decisions. And so either I can make a decision that I'm comfortable owning, or I shouldn't make it in the first place. But like this middle ground of like doing something, but then not feeling comfortable telling people, it's a bit of a cop-out. And it also, again, this is my very personal view, it also just sustains certain behavioral patterns, certain social patterns, cultural patterns, and expectations that aren't always the healthiest. And so now I'm almost not in your face about it, but I'm just a lot less guarded and not, I don't hide anything about what I've done or what I've spent money on or what I've invested in or whatever, because it's also a partnership. And like if we're not operating on equals in that capacity, then what else are we not operating as equals on? Yeah. And that's, to me, I just view it as a slippery slope. And so it goes back to this idea of owning your decisions with sensitivity, of course, but if you did something, then you should be okay letting people know you did it. And if you don't want people to know, then you shouldn't have done it to begin with.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good. Like it. Yeah, we've gone off on a tangent here, but I love it. I love it. Okay, so tell us more about what Entreprenora does.
Yeah. So basically, like I said, the key component is really this community, and it's a community for ambitious women, leaders, founders, and who really want to make some sort of a transformation in their lives or in their businesses. And so it could be really pushing themselves professionally if they're in a corporate environment, and going for a leadership position if they're founders. Again, it's all about scaling and growing their businesses. And we do all of this work through a series of master classes. We've got a mastermind group, which I refer to as our boardroom, which is a small group of founders that comes together every month. And then just a lot of, just sort of evening events where founders come and share their stories, because I think that's another thing that comes up so often, and you'd be surprised, or well, you wouldn't, because you also speak to a lot of leaders and founders, but everybody thinks that when they're doing something, when they're putting themselves forward for a promotion or asking for a raise or building a business, that it almost seems like you're the only one. And it can feel really isolating and really lonely. And like all of the challenges are uniquely targeted at you. And the thing is that when you are part of a community, again, of ambitious, driven, smart, generous people, as the entrepreneur community is, you realize it's actually just part of the process. The discomfort, the anxieties, the challenges, the awkward conversations, the setbacks, all of that is just part of the process of growth, of success, of starting something new or pushing yourself in a different direction, of making, basically, again, going back to what we said earlier, making any big transition or going through any big transformation. And so through the events and through the mastermind and through the master classes that we offer, it's both arming the women with the content and the knowledge that they need to have in their arsenal, but then also that mindset and community support to make sure that they can implement it within a group that is going to help them through it both practically as well as emotionally.
So great. I love it. I think one thing that kind of stood out to me as you were speaking through that is just the importance of, I know we always say things like, your network is your net worth and all these sorts of statements, but it is true in the sense that you want to be surrounding yourself always with, if you have this ambition to grow your business or to work on a lot of personal development or, your career or change your lifestyle or whatever, you need to be around other people who are also doing that and moving at a pretty rapid pace so that it holds you sort of accountable. And not to the point where you're just like, oh God, it's so unattainable, but to the point where you're constantly being pushed outside your comfort zone a little bit. Because as soon as you're, we all have, especially for us that all own businesses, we've all been in those circles of friends where, if you've got a lot of friends who are still in employment, they don't necessarily have that same mindset of growth necessarily. And actually that can hold you back a little bit. Whereas if you're constantly surrounding yourself with these ambitious and progressive and really just like forward focused people, that actually moves you forward so much quicker, doesn't it?
Definitely, definitely. And the word you use there that I love is growth. I think we need to surround ourselves with communities of people that are focused on growth. And it can be any type of growth, financial growth, personal growth, professional growth, whatever it is. But as you said, like the people we're around make such a huge difference. And, one of my favorite quotes that really just gets to the heart of it is, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Yeah.
And, it could be 5 people, or it could be the podcasts you listen to, or the books you read, or the TV shows, like all of that input into your brain and into your life. It's not passive. And we like to think that it is, but it's not. When you're submersing yourself in any form of energy, communication, insight, knowledge, conversations, whatever it is, that has an impact subconsciously for sure. And, and consciously as well. And so, like you said, when you were talking about being part of a community where it might seem like it's pushing you out of your comfort zone and things might seem unattainable. One of the things that I think is great about those communities is that actually they also show you how it is attainable. They also show you what you can do. It's not just, hey, look at me talking about my amazing, 7-figure business. It's also, hey, look, this is what I did. These are the steps you need to take, or the steps that I took, and you can learn whatever is applicable to your life from my journey. Because, and we talked about a lot of the groups that you and I are both in separately and together. And the whole idea is around sharing and lifting everybody up. It's not about grandstanding or hierarchies or anything. It's like, we all have something to learn. We all have something to give. Let's do this together.
That's a really important point too. And it's a big shift. And I don't know if it's a shift in society as such that moved towards wanting to uplift and support other people, or if it was just maybe my younger self that didn't feel like that existed. But I definitely have felt like in the last 10 years, or, since I've been running a business, that the majority of people that I do meet in these communities are about lifting each other up. And I don't know, maybe it was my experience working in the corporate world where that didn't feel that way. It felt a bit more like you were pushed down and you weren't encouraged to progress as much. Is that the environment of the culture of working in some of those types of businesses versus the sort of entrepreneur sort of community? Or is there actually a shift in, the way we did things 10, 15 years ago?
It's a really good question, because I would like to think, or I would hope at least, that it is a cultural shift. But it's also hard for either one of us to know, because we're so immersed in these environments, and it almost becomes like, oh gosh, everybody's, sort of positive and open-minded and focusing on growth because that's who we've chosen to surround ourselves with. Hopefully it's a bit of both, right? That there is a growing social conversation and a social awareness of some of the things that we talked about, growth and helping each other and that kind of thing. And I guess it then just goes to show sort of the evidence and the proof that, like, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Because if that's all we see, then that's clearly because of the people we're around. And that's a good thing, that we are sort of around these positive growth mindset sort of communities.
Yeah, exactly. Love it. Well, I mean, a lot of people will be looking at your business and going, this is great, and I love what you're talking about. But, with like a lot of small businesses, like most people's big challenge is around getting business, marketing, sales, converting. And I have obviously watched you since we met. I'm trying to think when it was. Was it 2-3 years ago? I feel like it's longer than like we think it is. Like, I'm like, like time flies, doesn't it, when you're having fun? So, I think and obviously I've been, we've talked a lot, and I'm also observing a lot of what's happening in your business, and I see everything from the social media activity that you do. I'm obviously a subscriber to your newsletter, your weekly newsletter that comes out on a Sunday. Like, you've obviously got your own podcast. So maybe talk to me a little bit around how you are performing marketing in your business, and let's start to share some tips with our listeners around what have you learned and what is working really well.
So I think, and this might be a bit counterintuitive, but actually my position has been, the marketing has to work for me. And that if I'm going to do it, until I get to the point of, outsourcing it to an agency or having a full-time marketing team kind of thing, especially when you're getting started, I think whatever you do, you have to just be consistent. And that consistency comes from doing things, yes, that are a bit outside of your comfort zone, but also things that leverage your personal preferences or communication preferences, whatever it is. For me, I love to write. I love writing. So being consistent, sending out a newsletter, once a week for the past 2 years has been relatively easy. I mean, I'm not saying there's no effort, but it's not something that I view with dread. So that consistency has allowed me to be in my community's inbox every single weekend for 2 years going, and there's no indication that's going to change. Some of that consistency comes from just doing what I love. But then secondly, I think we can all sort of view marketing with so much dread and so much baggage. And what's really helped me is to almost simplify it down to its essence. And there's this great Australian business coach and writer, Denise Duffield-Thomas, and her position is like, marketing is literally 2 things. It's sharing and making offers. Share your value, share what you know, tell people about it, and then make an offer. Tell them what you can do to help them. Tell them how they can buy your services. Tell them how they can join your community or your mastermind or whatever it is. And when you simplify it in that sense, it takes so much of the pressure off, because a lot of people hate marketing because they view it as salesy or sleazy or, that whole, again, that cultural baggage that comes from it. Yeah. But really, marketing is just telling your market how you can help them. And that is why you got into business in the first place, I would think, is this idea that you have something to contribute or serve or offer or create that's going to in some way help or delight your customers. And so if you sort of make it less of a big scary thing and just say, actually, it is just sharing and making offer off. And then thirdly, I guess, especially for businesses that are just getting started, it's not a marketing tip, but it's more of how you can sort of free yourself from some of the anxieties that come up around marketing, is really that idea that I shared earlier about having a financial runway or a war chest or a savings pool or whatever you want to call it. Because if you're constantly worried about getting clients because you can't pay the rent at the end of the month, that's going to be a totally different beast than if you're like, okay, well, I can, I've got my basics covered. I've whittled down my expenses to the bare minimum, so I'm not splurging or wasting anything. And I've got my bases covered by X, by my savings, by whatever it is. Then it gives you a bit more breathing room to do it in a way that isn't desperate.
Yeah.
And it isn't graspy or, cloying or annoying.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think that's sort of what I've done is, like I said, had sort of covered my financial bases with the first business, which wasn't a passion, but it, was something that definitely I enjoyed. Secondly is focusing on what I like to do, which is write, and being consistent with it and showing up for it. And then thirdly, I guess, this idea of, sort of de-stressing what marketing means. And the final tip I would share is actually you have to experiment, because you don't know what's going to work. And you actually, especially for those of us who are newer to marketing or to social media marketing and that kind of thing, you almost don't know what you don't know. And I found out through testing out the various channels and the various mediums and all of these things that I love, love, love doing videos and doing interviews. That was not something that I would have known otherwise. But it was when I was like, oh gosh, but I need to have some sort of or I thought I needed to have a YouTube presence or whatever. And so I started experimenting with doing videos, and then that lended themselves to doing interviews. And actually, I love it, but I would never have known, because I tend to be camera shy. I'm not someone who loves the camera, video, or photo. And I was like, oh, it's going to be awkward. People are going to see me. Strangers are going to listen to what I have to say and be really judgmental. And there's all of that kind of stuff that comes into it. But actually, I love it. And again, the consistency is key. I've been able to be consistent because I enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a really great piece of advice, because consistency is so important. And because, this has come up on multiple podcast episodes before, where it's like, we've all done business with people who have watched us. That sounds very creepy, but for, a year plus before they decide to hire us or to buy something from our businesses. So if you just do something for a couple of months and then let it fall off the bandwagon, then, you actually miss out potentially on a lot of that. So the consistency piece is really important. I think I was going to add something to the fear that a lot of people have around marketing and talking about what they have to offer. And I think a piece of it's just a shift in mindset towards is what you have to offer valuable?
Exactly.
If it is not, you probably should not be in business anyway. That is just the truth of it. If it is of high value and it's something that will truly solve a problem for a certain demographic of people, or it's just something that is essential, then you kind of need to get over yourself around talking about it, because it's by almost not sharing it that the world is not a better place for that, so if it is high value, all you're doing is sharing what it is that you've learned or what it is that you can do to help support somebody, and it becomes much less about a sale. I worked in telecoms, like telecom door-to-door sales for a period of time, and that definitely was not a passion for me. Like, that was not necessarily exciting at all. I don't have a passion for telecommunications, but I do have a passion for people. And something that I learned through doing that role was that actually, if I knock on someone's door and I can go into their house and I can look at their phone bill and see that they're spending £260 a month on all these international calls, and I have a package that's 30 quid a month and includes their international calls, that is really simple. That's a simple sale. And I have no issues pitching that, because I'm looking at, this is valuable to you. You will save money. I am helping you. And so a lot of people are sort of resistant around sort of doing sales, but if it genuinely solves a problem or it's genuinely helpful, why would you not want to talk about it and shout about it? And it doesn't have to be in an aggressive, pushy way. Here's something we have. Here's how it's worked for somebody else. And here's how much it is. Do you want it?
And this comes up a lot in our community as well, because again, a lot of the women founders and leaders that I work with want to help other people. They genuinely went into business to solve a problem, to help others, to sort of scratch an itch that they identified. And I put it a little bit more strongly actually. I sort of take the tough love approach, and I'm like, look, it's actually really selfish of you to keep yourself to yourself. So as you said, the fundamental principle is that whatever you have to offer has to be valuable and has to, help people in some way. But once you've got that covered, like if you're not telling people about it, that's really mean of you. That's
yeah.
It's doing the world a disservice, because all of a sudden you're holding back from telling people what could really help them with their lives. And as you said, then it's not a sale. It's just like, hey, this is how I can help you solve a problem. And if it's something that resonates with you, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, then this is how you can get it.
Yeah, exactly that. And what have you found? So, obviously you've talked about the newsletter you've done for the last 2 years, like weekly, and that's been really consistent. Your podcast, I feel like, has been over a year now, has it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just hit the year mark in June, I think.
Yay. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
And what have you found? I mean, how does all these different, we don't have to talk specifically to one channel necessarily, but just doing these things. So doing the email, doing the podcast, doing your socials, like how does that impact your business?
It's hard for me to really put a sort of my finger on it. I think what it has helped is build a bit of credibility. Mm-hmm. So and I think you said this once, Stacey, it's like people, if they're interested in what you have to offer, you want to be consumable in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
And so I think that has helped, right? Because they can listen to my podcast as they're walking to and from work or to meetings or whatever. They get their newsletter when they're on, sitting on the train, they can read it or whatever. Obviously, then we've got like master classes that they can actually come to and attend and learn from, et cetera. So I think it's just having different sort of consumption mechanisms, where people can consume the messages and the knowledge and the vibe of the community.
Yeah.
And I guess really it's just about it's about communicating in as many authentic ways as possible to your people. I think, of course, it helps build credibility, but it also just helps build that. I think, again, this sort of comes up a lot in business, but that know, like, and trust factor. If someone is getting ready to buy from you, and you said it perfectly, sometimes people are, quote unquote, checking you out for a year plus before they decide to take the plunge. And you want to be who you are, you want to be out there in lots of different ways that you're findable, searchable, so that they can get a sense of who they will be working with when they're buying from you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so pleased that you've said that because, as you know, from seeing me speak to different events and stuff, and everybody who listens to the podcast probably knows I'm drumming on always about all these different formats, that we want something visual. So for you, you have your YouTube channel and your social content where people can, visually see something that they're interested in. You've got something audio, you've got your podcast, you've got your newsletter, which is something written form. You've got your workshops, which is something actionable that people can do. And it's like, if I've come across you, let's say I just spot like one of your Instagram posts or your LinkedIn post or something, and I'm like, oh, Entreprenora, that sounds good. Oh, look at Rupal, she looks fantastic. I kind of resonate with what she said. Oh, she's got a podcast, let me hit subscribe on that. And then I go on with my life and I kind of forget for a bit. And then, I get a little alert to say, oh, this podcast episode is live. And I'm like, oh yeah, I meant to listen to that. And then you listen to it and you get hooked in. And then you've mentioned that you've got a workshop. So you go and little browse the website, and then the next episode comes out and you listen to that. And all of a sudden you've just created this opportunity for that person to just binge on you. And that once they've sort of, something has sparked in them and they like what you have to say, they will become completely engaged. It can go so far because it's like, even if I decide, okay, I'm listening to your podcast episode every week and I'm reading your newsletter and I don't necessarily need to be doing, your mastermind session. When I'm in a networking event or I'm speaking to a friend of mine who has a challenge and I'm just like, oh, you have to listen to Rupal because she talked about this on her podcast, and actually on her newsletter she said blah blah blah, and it's just, you just create so much more opportunity for yourself to get,
definitely,
for people to know who you are and what you have to offer. So I think it's great.
Well, and it also, as you were saying that, it just sort of brought to mind that a lot of, still, even in this world of tech and social media and consumption, a lot of client conversion happens through word of mouth. And so all you're doing by having a social presence is, yes, of course, there'll be some people who buy just because of, how they see you online, but a lot of people want to hear from other people about who you are, what you're about, what your business is like, how you deliver, all of those kinds of things. And when you've developed even if it is just a virtual relationship or a social relationship with someone, as you said, like, even if it's not relevant to you, the consumer of that information, you might know someone who could be like, oh, actually, yeah, go check out this website, or go check out Brand Lective, or go, whatever it is. And so the word of mouth still really, really means a lot. And I think, the social element and the marketing element just feeds into that, making that person who is referring you feel that much more comfortable that they can refer you to someone that, they know needs your services or your product.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. That's good. Right. So as we come towards the end of this episode, what would be a piece of advice that you could share with our listeners who are mostly small business owners who, have minor like business challenges or marketing challenges? Like what's a really good piece of advice? If you were, I guess, starting all over again, what would be the one thing that you would implement or do immediately to kind of get yourself, moving?
The big one is to get over yourself sooner.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a very loving way.
Yeah.
But it's, when you decide to become your own boss, you have to go in with eyes open that it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be straightforward. It's going to be full of all kinds of new experiences, challenging experiences, outside your comfort zone stuff. But the sooner you can get over that, the sooner you will start to see the results that you want. Because again, a lot of what holds us all back, regardless of where we're at in our stage of growth, is ourselves, is that like nagging voice in your head that's like, oh, you're not good enough, or oh, this is going to fail, or oh, this is, your competitors are better than you, or there are already 12,000 people doing this, so why are you doing it, kind of thing. And getting over that part of yourself, that sort of devil on your shoulder, whatever you want to call it, that mindset work is really, really, really key. I think most things in life come down to your mindset and your attitude about it. So the sooner you can address some of those devils, some of those hangups, the far better it'll be, both for you personally, but of course, professionally. So yeah, sort of get over yourself and just go out there and show the world what you can do.
Love it. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. How can our audience connect with you, Rupal? What's the best way to get in touch?
You can check out Entreprenora. So it's a slightly interesting spelling, but it's ENTREPRENORA. So it's Entreprenora and .co.uk. And so that's the best way. We've got tons of resources on there. You can contact us that way. There are links to the podcast, links to the YouTube channel, and all the other resources we create. So that's probably sort of, I would say, the first
hub.
The first shop. Yeah, the hub, the Entrepreneur hub.
Love it. And of course, in our show notes, we're going to be linking to all of your social channels.
Wonderful.
And as well. Oh, well,
Cool.
I just want to say a huge thank you for joining me today, because it's been so good. You always have such valuable insights to share. And as I mentioned at the beginning, such an interesting career path where I just love your energy and your approach to absolutely everything you do. You're really inspiring. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Stacey. It's an absolute pleasure. And actually, if I could just make a quick plug,
Sure.
I'm working on a book. And so,
yes.
So anybody who does sort of come check us out online through our socials or through the website, there's an opportunity for you to start to weigh in about sort of the content of the book. And so if that's of interest to anyone, definitely come check us out.
Yeah, amazing. Maybe send me a direct link to that and we can link it in the show notes as well.
Amazing. Sounds great.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Rupal. We'll catch you soon.
My pleasure. Thanks, Stacey.
It was so brilliant to have Rupal on the show today. Here are my 3 top attention grabbers from this episode. Attention grabber number 1, strive for something bigger. Throughout the whole conversation, Rupal constantly referred to that as something that has always driven her towards her next action, her next goal. She's someone who actually does that, someone who actually does strive for something bigger in everything that she does. Everything from when she took the job at the CIA and then decided to then leave that job after she had had all of her professional wins and her personal wins. She was curious. She went off and studied to strive for something bigger. She then started her own business in an industry that she defined as not necessarily her passion, but what was going to give her that freedom and that ability to create a life that she loves. So she's always striving for the next thing. And I absolutely take that as one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation. Attention grabber number 2, have a war chest. This was a really interesting conversation because finance and money are often things that many business owners struggle with. And I love that she mentioned plan a financial runway, that we shouldn't be afraid of money or talking about finance. It should be something that we really understand and have an abundance mindset about that. So how comfortable do you feel around money, and what more could you be doing to understand your current situation and plan towards the future that you want to create? And attention grabber number 3, mindset. This comes up a lot throughout the podcasts and different people that we interview. But of course, your network is your net worth. So who are you spending time with? Do you focus on growth, or does your network, the people that you spend the most time with, are they focused on growth? Whether that's in their own mindset, whether that's financially, whether it's personally within their business. There's so many ways to continue to grow, and it's very, very important to continue to develop that and work on your mindset. So thank you so much, Rupal, for joining the episode today. It was brilliant to have a conversation with you. Please do make sure that you go and check out the show notes, follow Rupal across all of her social channels, subscribe to her podcast, Entreprenora. She interviews incredible guests and has so much insight and just worthy information to share that it's well worth getting involved and connecting with her. So thanks again, Rupal Patel, for joining me on today's show.